This prophetic word was given unto me on September 28th, 2015 at 11:10 a.m. This is pretty much one of the powerful prophetic word. May not be that way to you, but it was to me because I could feel the gravity of the matter, or I should say the weight of the matter. And as believers, we have to start thinking the way God thinks, which is the broader picture. And so we can't always think about us, our lives, the churches that we attend to, or those who are affected by our lives or in our inner circles. Um, we have to start seeing things from a broader perspective, the way that God sees things. Why? Because the moment you signed up, so to speak, the moment you accepted Christ into your heart, you became involved in something much greater than yourselves, and something which contains a kingdom that contains uh, billions of people and or other creatures, and is no longer about just you. So being able to see things from a broader perspective is a necessity if you're going to mature in God and advance His kingdom. With that said, we can't just look at things from a all the time. We cannot look at things just from our perspective. It has to be from a broader perspective, which is God's. We can't look at things as being our lives. And so when we look at what's happening, we have to look at things nationally and the way God views things on a national level, on a level dealing with countries and nations. Not from our earthly perspective, but from God's. And so I don't want to, I really hate to say this, so I'm hesitant to say it, to use this example. This is before my time, but it obviously happened. So we're born into the traditions of our fathers, and a lot of times that cycle, when it comes to Christianity, we just repeat what was told to us by credible sources, and we believe those theology and doctrines and accept them, and it just become a way of living. With that said, before I was born, and we'll just take the 50s, that'll be a good time frame, even though it was occurring before that. Um, and movements that happened in the 60s. Not movement, but we'll take Billy Graham for an example. I'm not getting into his lifestyle or anything like that. I'm just talking about what happened. He was looked at as being I guess, the face of Christianity at one time. Uh, he at that time America was caught up in racism and prejudice, so it had to be a white guy that looked the part. If you're talking about representing Christianity or God, in order for it to be accepted amongst the masses, I'm not necessarily sure about the world, because the world wasn't as prejudiced as America was. It was really America was the worst on the planet. But nevertheless, he was also looked at as being God's apostle. I'm not touching that one. And but what I will comment on was some of the aspect of things which have happened, and I would tie this in with the Word of God. I'm not criticizing Billy Graham. Who I am criticizing is everything that came about with it, and there was no change or nothing done to really look into biblical truths. And I will say something about, I guess, him and Christians in particular, and that spirit never left. It's still here. We all know that Billy Graham was an evangelist, and I'm not. God obviously called him, so we're not doubting that one. But he was the again, face of Christianity, and he would talk to presidents and kings and things of that nature, and that started an outward work appearance that pastors, if they reached a certain plateau, would counsel presidents or be a spiritual advisor, so to speak. And that spirit, that temperament, that allowance of such has carried on and morphed into a tradition. All right. This is the word from September 28th. That this is just the meat of it, and it based upon a few scriptures. Second Chronicles chapter 32, all of it. Second Kings chapter 19, all of it. And once I tell you what it is, there are so many other scriptures and chapters and verses in the Bible that bears this up that it can't be disputed or doubted. Billy Graham and a lot of pastors were allowed to become the face of a movement, a religious movement, was the icon of it. And he became a trusted source along with other pastors to those who are in leadership, kings and queens, and so on. Basically what God said to me on September 28th, that we need to pray that God raises up his true prophets and prophetess that has been trained by him, called by him, ordained by him, created by him, and from the foundation of the world to be in a rightful positions, because pastors and evangelists, as great as some of the things that Billy Graham done, has been for the kingdom. But when we read scriptures, pastors and evangelists and teachers are never called by God to be the mouthpiece of him for a nation. That's only for the prophets. The apostles can be a mouthpiece as well, but we're talking consistently in scriptures. It's the prophets. When David, who was a king, got caught up with Bathsheba, who came to him? It was a prophet. When you read all and through the book of Isaiah, multitude of times when things happen, who did the king like Hezekiah call? The prophets. What is God saying? And that return practice has to come to this country. What is God saying? It has to come from God's ordained mouthpieces, and not those who are popular, not those who are on television, those who have thousands of followers at their churches. It's whoever God has ordained. And from scriptures, to be the mouthpiece of the Creator. Thus saith the Lord. I'm not saying anyone could not get a word from God for this country. I'm not saying that. But on a national scale, to begin to counsel presidents and kings and queens, it's the prophets. No one else. I take it back. It's the prophets, with the exceptions of an apostle. But pastors, evangelists, and teachers, and no one else is not qualified nor ordained by God from scriptures to give this kind of advice on a national scale to leaders. Not to have to be his earpiece. I'm not saying, again, no one can hear from God. I'm only simply stating by scriptures who God has created and raised up to be in that position or plateau. And so anyway, the word of God is on September 28th that we have to pray that God begin to raise up his prophets to speak to the leaders of the world. Thus saith the Lord, the hard-hitting prophetic words that'll put you on your knees, that only a prophet can speak, and that a person would know it comes from God. Again, let me make sure I dot all my I's and cross my T's for the people that's looking for mistakes. God can use anyone to speak a word. He used a donkey. But you can't preach a sermon on that. You cannot build a doctrine from it. God spoke through the heathen, Nebuchadnezzar, but you can't build a doctrine from that. God uses wicked people and men to do his will, right? But what is God going to predominantly use? Wicked men or his children? So we have isolated cases of God doing things because he can. But when we talking about having a doctrine, a belief system, and knowing the ways of God, because if you can know the ways of God, you can know him. And that's the bottom line here, is to always know the ways of God. Therefore, you can know God and know how he's going to move, not in 100% spectrum, but you will always be in the ballpark. You will always have a generalization of what God is going to do. You will always be in the arena, and therefore your chances of missing it has greatly diminished to pretty much 0%. You may miss the individuals or the specifics, but on a general, you'll never miss it. Never, ever in life. And that is what I'm speaking on right now. It's the generalization on who God uses to change the heart of kings, of presidents, of leaders. Prayer works from everyone within the land, and the intercessors thank God for you. But the advisors is the prophets of God. And that is what the church has traditionally ignored. We have accepted the pastor as being in a certain position. And I'm not picking on pastors, but our structure of the church is so off. It's just not even funny. And it's so many things that's wrong with how we do things, as opposed to when you open up the Bible and read it. And it's become our tradition that we become emotionally attached to it, that when you hear someone say something differently, you take it personal. And you're not supposed to take it personal. You're supposed to go to scriptures to see if it's true. And if it's true, then you have to make the adjustments. And if you can't make the adjustments, then you got a problem. And that's between you and God, or that's between really you to get it straightened out. So again, the prophetic word on this day is that God has to put his prophets in their rightful positions in order for the nation, if it's going to turn around after a cataclysmic event happens, things have to be in its rightful order. See, right now, the church, the United States don't deserve a man of God leading it. The world ain't ready for it, and the church ain't desperate enough for it. The church isn't desperate enough to receive a man of God to lead the nation. There's too much stuff wrong with the church right now. Okay, I'm not even going there. That's another prophetic word that God really dropped on me last night. I'm not going into that yet because he haven't told me to release it. But I'll just say that the United States don't deserve right now a true man of God or woman of God to lead it. Not into the church begin to do some of the fundamentals which it should do. Because if the man or woman of God get in place right now, and God did begin to turn this nation around where calamity was spared, which it won't be, what would the church do? What would be the response from the church? Business as usual. It's like that now, and things on the horizon is coming upon us that we know is wrong. And the church overall has not changed her directions. It's still business as usual. And so I'm just going to say, this is directions. This is a prayer that we all should be praying, that God raises up his true prophets to speak, and that they will have, that the leaders of this country will be able to solicit advice from the prophet or prophetess of God that will speak, thus saith the Lord, do this and do that to get this thing turned around, and or to do what a prophet will do to tell you you got trouble coming. And this is what you got to do, prepare, and it's going to happen, and nothing you can do about it. That is what we need now. And everyone needs to follow and fall in place based upon their position in God and whatever God called you to do, precept upon precept, line upon line, and not upon tradition.